there is going to be this transition of wealth over the next 20 years. It depends on who you believe, but somewhere between 20 all the way up to $80 trillion will change hands. How that happens is going to be important in the way people's perceptions are different, right? So the younger generation thinks about perhaps ESG or technical platforms where the older generation really doesn't. So we do a great job of engaging the younger generation, not only technology, but getting them involved in the thought process as well.
One of the interesting things that I have seen with some of the higher net worth clients is when is the appropriate time to start bringing in the younger generations to discuss what that wealth transfer could look like. I think you maybe are like me where you've experienced that suddenly you get an inheritance, a very sad event that leads up to that,
right.
But then you do get the inheritance, and sometimes it would be nice to get a little heads up, especially if it's going to be something more substantial. With a lot of our higher net worth clients, we have seen that where they want to have those conversations about stewardship, about the legacy, the wealth that has been created, and handing that off to another generation, and how is that going to be managed in a prudent way? Because isn't there that old saying about where you go from shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve
and then back in a couple of generations, right?
Yeah, it's very true. That can happen.
So we talked to both older clients and their younger generations, and the first three things that you would think are important would be capital gains tax and dividends tax, estate taxes, and transaction fees. Those are obvious, but then there's this bifurcation of the way people think about it, and what's the intended use of the money would be one of those, or what is the company's ESG track record? The older generation, it's not a high priority. The younger generation, it is, and perhaps even sentimental value of the investments. All of this goes into the conversation.
Especially that sentimental value. I've seen that coming up more and more frequently where we're sitting down with clients and they're like, don't touch that stock. It's been so good to me over the years. But we do have to point out that he might not want to get emotionally attached to one of those assets. And then plus, how are you going to enforce that, especially after death? You can't really dictate those portfolio moves from beyond the grave, right? I mean, maybe you can set up a foundation, maybe you can have it as far as, some sort of directive in the trust, but how enforceable are those things? And as you point out, those generational differences, especially the ESG one, I think that's a very interesting one. We have so much data now compared to what we had just maybe 10 years ago about what are different companies' policies as it relates to environmental stewardship, social issues, governance issues. And I think for a while it was becoming very popular to launch a lot of these exchange-traded funds and mutual funds that were just focused on like these ESG leaders and the such. But what we're finding is people don't necessarily want to only invest in that. That's not the sole factor that they're looking at. It's part of the equation. It's not the whole thing.
And we do a lot of these private client conversations. And if you're hearing this is not just about having your will or your revocable trust done. These are conversations about family dynamics. It's about unequal distribution of assets sometimes. It's about clear instructions and a whole lot of transparency, not only for the executor and trustee, but the family members as well. These are complex conversations, the stuff that we do. People like you, PhDs, we have JDs on our staff, we have CPAs on our staff. When I talk about know the difference, that's what we're talking about. The team that we bring to the table is so important.